pledge never to lie to us from that podium?
I will never lie to you. You have my word on that.
Well, there it is, Kayleigh McEnany making that pledge during her first official White House briefing since becoming press secretary that yesterday. You know, the briefing in which she appeared was the first in over a year in that room. Ms. McEnany hinted that the press conferences could again become a regular occurrence now that she is the press secretary, and she'll no doubt face a lot of controversies. One brewing right now in Washington, the White House decision to block Dr. Anthony Fauci from testifying before a House panel on the administration's response to the pandemic, calling that, quote, counterproductive at this time. But, you know, we are told that Dr. Fauci will appear before a Senate Health Committee hearing, that to happen in about 2 weeks. And we now have the press secretary herself, Kayleigh McEnany, joining us from the North Lawn of the White House. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As you know, good to have you, and good to have you answering the questions. Dr. Fauci, as you know, Kayleigh, has become a somber messenger of truth and reality. Some say, and I fear that the White House is trying to muzzle him. You're trying to keep him away from the Democratic House members, even though he's set to appear before the Senate. Why was the decision made not to have him appear before the House?
Yeah, so let me explain that, Eric. First of all, we act in good faith, and we expect the same of our counterparts, the Democrats in Congress, namely. We want to ensure that our experts, that it's the best use of their time at that moment. It doesn't detract from their day job. But beyond that, ensuring that the right subject matter expert is there for the right testimony. So, for instance, in this case, Chairman Lowy actually made several calls to Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, who I just spoke with. And the Chief of Staff repeatedly asked what the subject matter of the hearing would be. Besides giving vague responses, she never gave too much detail as to what the actual subject matter would be, other than it being a subcommittee for HHS funding, which would have been a rather odd fit for Dr. Fauci, being that he's at NIH, which is a subdivision of Secretary Azar's HHS. So when we pressed for details as to why Dr. Fauci in particular was the right person for this testimony and this hearing, those details were never provided. In fact, the Chief of Staff gave his email address and never received a response from the chairman.
They've publicly, Ms. Lowy, and they publicly said they want to investigate the administration, response. They're going to have Tom Frieden, on instead of the doctor. What do you think about that?
Look, that's their decision, but they were not acting in good faith with the administration here. Beyond that, I'd also note where the Senate gave us their plans to social distance and how to do this safely. The House has yet to do that. So they're not acting in good faith. And this really was a publicity stunt on the part of Democrats, saying that the White House blocked Dr. Fauci, because that wasn't the case. Quite clearly not the case when he's going to be testifying before the Senate in just over a week. So, leave it to the Democrats to engage in publicity stunts and put out a false headline with no truth.
Well, won't the Democratic senators have a chance to ask the doctor questions?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The Senate has acted in good faith on this matter, and we readily provided Dr. Fauci. But we would encourage Chairman Lowy to do the same and to work with the Chief of Staff, because we certainly are trying to do that here.
Meanwhile, in terms of testing, the administration's been accused of being way behind the ball on that. Underplaying the threat, not getting enough testing out. What can you tell us about that to try and reassure Americans? Because health experts, as you know, say testing and contact tracing are what needed to finally put this virus away once and for all.
Sure. So let me say a few things on that. First of all, we've tested 6.75 million Americans. That's more than any country in the world, and in fact, double what most countries have done. I was on the governor's call when the president and the vice president spoke with the governors, and I heard Admiral Joie assure each and every one of them that we have enough testing supply to meet all of their state testing needs that they've laid out. And as a reminder, it is up to the states to take a lead here. So the federal government has supplemented that effort and done so in an extraordinary fashion, 6.75 million tests. And I would also note, in terms of developing a test, I think one thing that's under-discussed and under-reported is that this FDA, under the leadership of President Trump, issued 70 emergency use authorizations. So that fast-tracked the production and the creation of testing. And you compare that to Zika, where there were only 20, and H1N1, where there were only 17. That's a pretty extraordinary accomplishment. And the American people can be sure they have a businessman in the White House who knows how to work with the private sector and get this done.
You're right when you point out that we've had more tests than any other country in the world. However, not per capita. 40 countries are ahead of us. We're right now at, 20,288 per million. I mean, Germany, Spain, Italy, Canada, Belarus. Israel's at double the numbers. Didn't the administration make a mistake by not following up strongly enough, by not having this testing in action and starting? You know, it's not been February when we knew about the virus.
Well, the administration acted quickly, and I'd note that on per capita in our hotspots, we have done more than each of those countries. I'd also note South Korea, which is hailed for their testing. Dr. Birx noted this week where they're doing 11 tests per 1,000. We're doing 17 tests per 1,000. So we're deploying testing strategically in areas where people need them, where hotspots, for example, there's a much greater need for people for testing because there's symptomatic people. So we've done this strategically. 6.75 million is an extraordinary number. And I mentioned again those 70 emergency use authorizations, and comparing that to previous administrations like President Obama and Vice President Biden with swine flu, they had just 17.
You pointed out something and said something a moment ago that the states need to take the lead. But the states say it's the federal government. You know, Johns Hopkins says that we need a contact tracing program, 100,000 contact tracers hired, $3.6 billion. There's some bills up in the Capitol Hill for that. Would the administration support, you know, what health experts say, a civilian conservation corps type, a work progress administration, massive federal program that is needed to test and contact trace every single American? Would the administration support that as something that we've seen pretty successfully done in some other countries in order to be able to follow the contact tracing?
Look, I won't get ahead of the president on saying if we would or would not support a certain federal measure. But what I would say is the states have put together plans that they've sent to the administration saying this is what we need to reopen. This is what we need in the way of testing. And it's differed from each and every state. But the administration has been able to look at that and guarantee that as we move to this phase 1 of reopening, the tests in accordance with their plans, which they took the lead on, the states will have that testing. We have been a great partner. I heard one Democrat governor say this week, and I won't say his name, but he said because of this administration, lives were saved in my state. Governor Chris Cuomo has said that we've been phenomenal partners here at the White House. President Trump has. We've done a very good job, which is why you're hearing widespread praise for this effort on testing and otherwise.
Well, you know, other critics say that accuse the administration and the president directly of having blood on his hands. Of saying that they did not do enough at first. So finally, how would you respond to that? And you know, you see a lot of these critics and people who really think that the administration and the federal government didn't do enough to protect America.
Yeah, that is a completely inappropriate accusation and one that just has no bearing in the truth. When you consider these facts, that this is the greatest mobilization of the private sector since World War II, when you consider the fact that this president was given a choice, and that was 2.2 million American lives lost or shutting down the economy. And he shut down the economy to save lives, to keep us far below that 2.2 million number. And the mobilization of the private sector has been extraordinary. For instance, in 95 masks alone, this president has deployed 75 million. On the average year, the healthcare system uses 25 million. So we have done 3 times that in just 2 months. This is a job that could have only been done by someone like President Trump, and just those criticisms really have no bearing in truth.
2 million if there weren't any actions taken, but there were
Right.
and have been social distancing and other actions taken. Kayleigh McEnany, I'm sure we'll have a lot more interviews down the road. You certainly are full of facts, a graduate of Georgetown and Harvard Law School, out on a Saturday on the front lawn of the White House. Congratulations and welcome to the line of fire as the press secretary.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Kayleigh, thank you.